Patrick?
Terry.
Well, that was a struggle.
I did the same thing about an hour ago. Something had a hiccup, and I fought to make it work. Except it looked you turned around really fast. Mine took about a half an hour. Um,
Well, I've been doing these religiously for about 6 months. So I've run into, and I live in an area where the uh, communications are suspect at best. And right today is beautiful, sunny, perfect. But if we have any kind of bad weather, man, it's just very questionable. How
y-
are you?
I today is a good day.
All right.
We've launched off the fundraiser. It's always a nervous time leading up to it.
Yep.
But this year, the fact that we knew we had some matching money coming in, so that'll really help get us off on a good foot. And the streaming, I have not made any huge egregious mistakes, and people are showing up, and so yeah, it's
Look, you are to be commended for the work you've done with that charity. I really am impressed. We don't get too many people that launch their careers along with launching a charitable effort to help people with books and reading and whatever they're doing. And you're one of the ones who's done, it, and everybody knows your charity, and I think that's great.
it's been a great joy. I actually met someone the other day where it was actually really oops, hold on. I'm gonna switch one thing here, and I'm gonna switch one thing here. Now we look a little bit better on the stream. Yay! Now we have a background. Um, uh, I was talking to somebody. I reached out and I'm like, hey, so there's this charity called World Builders. If you're interested, and they're like, oh, I know all about World Builders. That's cool that you're helping them out. And I
Mhm.
was like,
And you said, yeah, big time.
and I was like, oh, I was so glad that they heard about World Builders, but actually I was doubly glad that they knew about it and they liked
Yes.
it,
Yeah.
and they had no idea that I started it. And
Yeah,
and because that's the dream. I hope
that is.
increasingly over the years they'll be like oh, World Builders, that's that charity that Terry Brooks like guested in and helped them out. And I'm like, and also he was talking with some beardy murder hobo looking guy. Uh,
I don't think it'll come to that, but I
yeah,
think it. I think it will. I think what you want is for it to have a life of its own beyond your own life and your own efforts. And you launch something like this. It's like raising a child that goes right instead of wrong. Um,
that's the hope. There've been some growing pains over the years because Lord knows
sure. Oh,
I've
sure.
I've never meant to I've never meant to start a charity or run a business, and I had no training for either of those, so
Oh, yeah.
I've duffed it pretty good here and there, um,
Well, you
but
can usually recover from most of it.
just like
Even when you make a mistake or whatever, you can usually get yourself back online without too much trouble.
yeah,
But no, the average person who does these things, it's usually an organization, and they hire a lawyer right off the bat to get them straightened around with the what does the government require, that they're not going to come after me for running a bogus charity or something.
that would have been real smart if I'd have done that.
Well, right now you don't have to worry because we don't have a government as yet, and because what we do have of it is only interested in one charity, and that's their own charity. So you don't have to worry. They don't have time or people to investigate small fry like you and me.
Yeah, I will take the silver lining where I can get it. These days, of course, to reassure everyone in the stream, we are very legit. We are a 501c3.
Of
We
course you are.
we pay our taxes, but I will say at the beginning, I was very much not. And at one point, I was running it all through my personal PayPal account,
Yeah.
and PayPal was kind of like, "Hey, we noticed that a bunch of people just gave you like $80,000 we think you're either selling drugs or doing some huge
Right,
pyramid
right.
scheme. And it was to their credit, where I called them on the phone and I'm just doing a charity, man. And they're like, it also like, are you sure it's legal? And I'm like, it's so legal. Look at my blog. And they're like, cool, cool, go on. And mostly they were like, okay, we need to change some stuff. We need some verification.
Yeah.
But to their credit, and then they made me toe the line and they helped me through the process. But what they didn't do is shut everything down 3 days in, which again,
Yeah.
it's so rare
Which
to
they could have done.
yeah,
Yeah.
to run into a corporate entity that is willing to be cool when somebody has made an honest goof up. So
Well,
yeah.
back in the dark days of my life, when I was a lawyer, part of some of my clients were charities, and it was kind of pro bono work. But I helped organize them, so I became real familiar with 503Cs and with whoever was running it and what they could do and what they couldn't do. So that has helped. One of the things I've been able to take away from that 10 or 15 or 20 years of my life, that's been useful since, is my understanding about how these things work. And that really does give you kind of a leg up on having to deal with some of the charitable questions.
Yeah, at this point I kind of joke about like, oh, if only I knew how to run a thing. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, well, I've gotten used to saying that kind of because it's true and kind of as a joke. And then I'm like, well, actually, after 10 years, I do really kind of know
Sure you do.
a lot about, like, I've spent a lot of time on the phone with a lot of different flavors of lawyer and really
Yeah.
looked at a lot of contracts. And
Yeah.
now I know how to assemble bylaws and do boards of directors and such. But I kind of wish I could have walked into this with a little more of that knowledge, though.
Well, life is all about what we should have known back when and how we wish we would have lived our lives a little bit differently. Me more so than you. You got a ways to go yet. But I'm definitely at that stage where I'm thinking, how many more years am I going to be able to actually write a book where my mind doesn't wander off into the hinterlands somewhere? How much longer before I start to have trouble remembering stuff? Oh, wait, that's here already.
Like, and this isn't where I intended to go, but
It was fun though.
well, no, but like you brought this up, and like, I mean, I had like some similar thoughts. I used to joke, and I'd be like, when you're a teenager, you think you're immortal.
You do.
When you're in your 20s, like you're not a teenager anymore, but you know that you'll always bounce back.
Yeah.
In your 30s, you're like,
Why did I do that?
why did I do that? And it's like, and you're like, maybe I should think twice,
Mhm.
and then in my 40s, but I also sometimes would think about it in terms of like when something hurts.
Yeah.
And when you're a kid, like I watch my kids, they run around and they just go bam and they fall down and they're like, ah, and they get up and they're like, but I gotta play, and they just keep on
Yeah.
going. It
Yeah.
just doesn't register.
Energizer bunnies.
And then like in your 20s, you're like, you fall over or like you hurt and you're like, and you kind of like rub it and you're like, I'm good. It'll be
Yeah.
fine.
That's right.
And then in your 30s, you're like, oh, I should take care of this. And what I realized, like in my 40s, I'm like, something hurts, and I'm like, is this going to hurt forever? It's like, I think, is this it? And I not to turn this into a weird conversation, but one of the things that you kind of brought it up, it's like, how many years do I have left? This, partly because of the pandemic and other things, I've kind of, what's that great quote? I've heard the eternal doorman hold my coat and snicker, and I've been afraid. At one night alone in this house, I was walking down the stairs and I fell.
Yeah.
And I sat and I'm alone in this house, and I sat there, and my first thought was, am I okay? And my second thought was, is this it now? Am I now a person who
Who falls downstairs?
falls downstairs, who maybe like do I need one of those bracelets? Do I need something? But I think and all humans go through this path, and we go through it at different paces and in different ways.
Yeah.
But I feel like authors, and here's why I want to sort of see, and again, this is very much an if you want to talk about it thing. I think that, you know, in some ways we are fortunate in that, like, we are not, trying to think of the example, we are not Olympic gymnasts, you know, which is, and I hope, sorry to break anyone's heart there, that I'm not. I know a lot of you were really waiting for that
They
video.
were next Olympics.
But like there, your career is like, oh, you're 20, you're done. You know, like maybe if you're lucky, you get to teach this thing,
I think
or
about that with sports a lot. It's true. It
or
is.
or a ballerina. You know, like how
Yeah.
about you destroy your body, honing it to this razor's edge, but also now you are 19, you are so past your prime, um, because like you just simply can't. People like musicians, or you know, like a musician, if you treat your voice right, it's the only instrument that gets sweeter as you age. I think if you work in some of these creative pursuits, your craft can build for decades. But since we are like living this life of the mind, at some point we get to where like what how long do I got? You know, how long do I got, either because our time is finite, or because, you know, like something you can just get a knock in the head, you know? But do you, cause I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and, uh,
I can speak to you about being 70 some and
70. Wow.
pushing 80.
See,
What I can tell you is that there's some things that you can count on. Number one, if you fall down and bruise yourself, you'll have the bruise for a week, maybe longer. Number two is that it will hurt, and it will hurt for a week, maybe longer. And number three is you will tell yourself, unless you're in real serious pain, this is nothing. I've suffered worse. I'm not paying any attention to this. I'm pushing on. And then but you do take stock of how you feel every day and how you're functioning. And I've had some times when I thought, you know, I'm forgetting things that I shouldn't forget. I should know these things, but they're never about writing.
really,
It's true. All the stuff that I know about writing and about the craft and about what I've learned and how to put a story together, that's all really intact. It's the peripheral stuff like the kids' names, things like that. I don't remember those anymore. But I think it's kind of a blessing, and I think this is the one of very few areas where you can work your whole life. And I'm thinking right now about someone like Ben Bova,
right?
who had a terrific career, and I just wrote a remembrance about Ben because he was the first real author I ever met, and spent time with and became close to. And he and his wife mentored me when I was going through a very difficult time. But we kept meeting up at odd places, and every time we would meet up, something strange would happen or something memorable every single time. And I remember him for his good humor and his terrible jokes and his Monty Python imitations. And you know, you think, well, that's the way I want to go out. I want to have I want to have people with those kinds of memories, so that I feel like I've lived a good life and I've done something with my life that is meaningful beyond the part that involves the writing and the books themselves. And I think that's kind of part of what we all hope for, yeah, to some extent or another, because that's the thing that's going to matter after we're gone. Nothing else is going to matter to us, of course, because we're gone.
Right.
But as far as anybody you're leaving behind or what kind of a legacy you're leaving, you know, we want to write good books. We want to write memorable books. We want people to feel transported and emotionally involved in what we do. And that's something we can affect directly. But it's a little harder to determine how we will be treated in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember when I was first starting out and didn't know squat, uh, that I was at a Random House breakfast or some darn thing, and there was another writer there who was doing quite well. And we were having dinner with the head of Random House and Ballantyne, and I think there was a publicist or somebody there. It was one of those just getting to know people kind of things. And they said, well, "What do you hope to accomplish?" And the other writer said, "I want to win the Hugo, the Nebula, Best New Writer," and he listed all these things. And I'm sitting there thinking, "You do?" And they asked me, and I said, "Only thing I want to do is make this a career, so I never have to be a lawyer again. You know, I just want to write books and sell books so that I can keep doing this." And I felt like that was the ultimate goal. And the idea of the awards and so on was of not much interest. Making a lot of money is good. I kind of like that, but you can't always control how that's going to go. Witness our current situation here.
Yeah.
But you can control how you come across, with people.
Yeah.
And what you do. And I think about you all the time with your charity, and what you're doing with that is you're building a legacy aside from what you're doing with your books.
Huh.
And I think that's really important. And I think you're really to be commended for that. And I suppose you hear this a lot, but I do think it's something that can be mentioned.
Well, it's interesting, and that is that's very kind. I honestly, I don't think about it very much in the same way that, like, I don't think about taking care of my boys, where it's like, well, they're my boys,
Yeah.
like,
You're stuck with that.
right. I mean, I actually, it is a little similar, because sometimes, sometimes I'm a little self-conscious parenting in front of people, because I don't know, I'm a little self-conscious. Like, if I'm at the playground, like, of course everybody knows that dads are important, but still, like, I'll be at the playground with the boys, and there's a bunch of women there and me and kids. And I kind of almost feel like I should be saying, "Hey, everyone, just those are mine over there. I'm not a creeper."
I was going to say, then they're looking at you askance.
Right. And
what are you doing here, fellow?
Right. And I'm like, just so everyone knows, I'm legit. Or when and I remember kind of growing up, like, my mom would occasionally step in and tell a little kid to stop being maybe quite so much of an asshole. And that was kind of okay. Different time. Right. But also, you kind of, like, and I don't know if it's like, something emerges in a person, but certainly, I mean, I only knew my mom once she had unlocked mom, like, achievement unlocked.
Yeah.
She was a mom.
Yeah.
But, like, she was not afraid. She did not just mom me. Like, she could mom other people.
Yeah.
But also, I'm like, but also she was right. And sometimes she would step in and kind of take care of a thing that needed taking care of.
But you would think twice about that.
Oh,
right?
I think so much more than twice.
Yeah.
And
I would too.
Yeah. But what's interesting is I have slowly, and maybe it would also be different if I looked a little different, a little bit less like a bike, like a biker or whatever. Like, but I do remember some of those early times where I did feel the need to justify my presence.
Yeah. We all do.
But and then I'm always nervous about maybe doing some of my parenting, because I am a little strict, and I do believe that, like, kids need guidelines and discipline, and so I will stop and I'll say, "Oh, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this, and here's why." And then I'm immediately like, "Oh, does everyone think that I'm a controlling monster?"
Right.
But what's interesting,
who are you and to tell my kids what to do?
Right. And then what somebody actually said once, they're like, where it was a friend, and I was around them with my kids, and afterwards they said, "You're a really good dad." And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, your kid, like you talk to your kids about their emotions. It's like, and they're like, nobody ever told me that stuff when I was a kid. And the way that they talk to you about their feelings, it's like, I didn't learn that till I was in my 20s. And I'm like, oh, well, it's like, that's nice to hear. I guess I'm just kind of doing my best. And why would I do anything other than my best? But it was nice to hear from them that it looked nice too. And so the reason I'm telling this real roundabout thing is to say, like, for world builders, it's like, oh, I suppose I do it a lot, don't I? But it's one of my kids. And like, how could I not do world builders?
Yeah.
And you say that a lot of people must say this, but actually, like,
Well,
like when you just said it now, I'm like, oh, like, I guess, like, thank you. I guess it is something I choose to do, although it doesn't feel like a conscious choice. And it's nice. I appreciate that you like that. Thank you very much for that.
well, I wasn't going to do it, but Sean gave me $25. So yeah, I'll say it. What the
uh, so
hell?
I would just happily chat with you about anything for as much time as you had available. I thought I might give the opportunity for the people who are watching to maybe throw out a question or two about things in general, writing or whatever. I'm not committing
Sure.
to do half an hour of just Q&A, and I'm not saying if you do, um, just because you do ask a question, we're not necessarily going to answer it. I'm going to pick and choose a little bit. Um, but feel free to bounce a couple into the chat. Yeah, and how about this? We'll also say no spoilers about things.
Yeah, please.
Um, and and I'll lead off by something I've been asking everyone who stops by today, because we're doing the charity fundraiser, and there's a lot going on there that is fun. We've got matching money, so if people donate, your impact on the world is doubled. We're giving away thousands of donation incentives. Every $10 you kick in gets you a chance to win books and games. We're giving away 3 individual customizable handmade wormwood gaming tables. That you can, oh, they're so pretty, Terry. I'm really resisting the urge to just do a screen share and like show you how pretty you can make it out of black walnut or anything, and change the size and shape according to what you want. Wormwood has donated those. You can win them for your very own. But we're also aware that this is a rough time. A lot of people are having, economic trouble. A lot of people are not working as much or have lost their jobs. So we didn't want this fundraiser to be all about money, although we are looking to raise money to change people's lives and help them in meaningful ways forever. But
Yeah,
we also,
the need doesn't stop because times are tough. Now, I thought about this a lot lately because I've gotten a lot of requests from various charitable uh, organizations that I've been affiliated with to please send money. Things are desperate. And I'm thinking, yeah, they are. And you can't just say, well, I'm suffering too. You have to say, I'll man up. I maybe not be able to do what I've done in the past, but I'm not going to just forget and throw you under the bus, because the demands are worse in many ways than they were in better times. And this is going to go on for probably another year at least.
at least
We're going to
another year.
so,
Yeah.
and I think certainly it applies to world builders too. And we want to encourage people to continue to support the organization, even though things are hard for them too. If they can do something, they should consider doing it.
Yeah. And I will say, everybody, $20 will buy a family that it allows Heifer International to provide the education, the training, and the tools and materials to like have a flock of chickens which produce eggs they get to eat every day. Eggs make more chickens. They can sell the extra eggs for money. It's effectively giving a family a small business that also feeds them. And it moves endlessly and improvingly into the future. or they provide clean water, or they help send young girls to school, or they help people improve the crop yields in their gardens. They do so many things all over the world. They're such a good charity. Um,
Even
and
before you and I were friends, and we knew each other, the Judine and I were involved with Heifer, and and they are a great organization, and it's astonishing to think that $20 can buy what you are saying they can buy, or what it can buy in third world countries and disadvantaged areas. But it can, and we take so much for granted here. As you know, if you want to buy a meal, McDonald's is it, or something of that ilk. If you want to go out for dinner, you're going to drop $100,
yep,
and we don't think anything of it. But for it to provide for a family, oh, don't, come on, get over it. But that's the truth, and that's why they're such a great organization. And the whole, as we used to do donations, I'm not sure we're doing this anymore, but we used to do the thing where you would choose an animal that would be donated for a family to use in their farming business or their whatever business they were doing. I always thought that was a great idea too, although it seemed somewhat weird, but yet it made perfect sense.
it's I in learning about heifer, people, what I would do uh, back in the day is I would send, um, oh, thank you so much. Second coffee of the day, people. Woo! Um,
Notice your
thanks.
chair rose slightly.
Um, yay. Um, and like people refer to the goat as the grandmother of civilization because they eat anything, they live anywhere, they produce a gallon of milk a day, and like before I became like like published and had grown up money, I would still every year I would buy my mom something out of the Heifer gift catalog, and they're like, and it wasn't, at that point we weren't actually buying an animal, but we knew that with $120, Heifer had enough to train up and get an animal into the hands of people and teach them how to make a pen and teach them how to do zero pasture grazing and teach them how to take care of it if it got sick. And and they do so much stuff. Given that you have some experience, like, do you have a favorite like heifer thing? Like, I'm always been fond of the goat or the chickens, but what, when you think of heifer, were you like, if you were thinking about an animal, where would you go in your head?
Well, you know what? We are believers in spreading the wealth. So we have latched onto various animals at various times when that particular animal reached a certain point of popularity in the family.
Yeah.
Uh, Now that the family is down to just two of us, the voting record is somewhat, you know, compromised by my wife holding a larger vote than I do on the matter. And at the moment, uh, I don't know quite which direction she's going. We have done goats for sure. Uh, right now, she's on a bird kick. Although I don't know, it's hard for me to identify with chickens. But nevertheless, if that'll get the job done, that would be it.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
it's the same with, it's the same when you give to any of the wildlife causes, world or national wildlife causes. It's the same approach. If you're particularly fond of an animal, right away you think about wanting to do something for that particular animal. And that's kind of the way I think these things work. Although with heifer, at least, you're looking a little more sometimes at the country and the conditions, and I don't know.
and
I mean,
that's, yeah, and
I
that's
don't, I don't know if you've been to Africa or not.
not
Uh,
yet. I really, they've
well,
Heifer has invited me out to some of their sites, but I haven't made it yet.
let me just tell you, we have been to Africa on safaris twice. And when I say safari, I'm talking about the kind where you take photography
Yeah.
of animals. So we went in the 90s, and then we went again in the teens, 20 teens, and stayed for 3 and 4 weeks at a time. And, had a guide who was a photographer and all this. But the thing of it is I didn't want to go there because frankly, I was a little afraid of it. And so, and also I never traveled anywhere until I was 42 and met Judine. And then I decided to make up for lost time. But what I discovered, she said, you are going to be amazed at what you're going to see. And I thought, yeah, right, I've heard that one before. It was going over there was life transformative, like nothing else I've ever done in this world has been. It was astonishing. And it was one of those trips where, as we're doing the photography and the sightings and so forth, every day would end with something spectacular, or it would happen during that day. And I think nothing can beat this day, and tomorrow would be better every day. And I've never had that happen anywhere else. So, I would go back now. I don't care how old I am. And if I die in Africa, I'll go the way of some other famous people, more famous than me. But I just feel like of all the things you can do and of things that people think, well, that's a lot of work, it's a long way and so forth. It's really the one that everybody should, if they have a chance, do. So I urge you to find a way.
I should. I mean, I was getting a little burned out on travel because I'd done so much, convention and everything else over the last 10 years. So in some ways being forced to stop for the pandemic was a bit of a hidden blessing for me. And I've hunkered down and actually started putting things on my walls in my house. And such, like a regular human being. But
Astonishing.
but now it's getting around to the place where it's like, well, when it does start back up, I would like, especially now that the boys are old enough, to really
Yeah.
kind of come with me and see it, to to broaden their experiences in ways that they'd appreciate.
I,
Um,
I think that travel is a broadening experience in every sense that they say it is, and that it's important that we realize there's another world out there that doesn't just appear in the news.
yeah,
Um, and one of the things that I learned is that wherever you go, and this is a cliche, people are still people,
yep,
and people, and they will respond to you pretty much the same way we respond to ourselves. If you're there at a time when we have an unpopular president, they don't particularly want to be your friend.
yeah,
If you're there, I'll never forget going to, we were in Dubai, and then we traveled over into Syria, Jordan. This is right before everything went to hell in the tens. And I can remember going on up to these little villages and so forth, and the residents would be sitting there on their steps and so forth, and they would, of course, they spoke very little English. Uh, but at this one place we went to, we pulled up to a kind of a general store area, and then we were supposed to go down and look at this, 17th century castle or whatever it was down there, a fortress thing. And the guy says, as we get off the bus, he says, "Obama?" And we said, "Yes, Obama, right in the election." And the guy says, "Fuck Bush." Like that. And we were like, whoa. But that's kind of, but the people you would go to in Syria, we sat in the souks, we would sit there in the markets and talk to people. Most of them spoke some English at least. And it was the most amazing thing. They would talk about the same things we would talk about back here: the climate, the price of eggs, how the government is going. And in Syria, I'll never forget when we were in Syria, the the people I sat with in the market said, well, they said things are pretty stable here. They're pretty stable. And this I think was in 7 or something like that, or 6. And he says, he said, we have a few problems with the different divisions of the population and so forth. He says, but Assad is a placeholder. He's a placeholder president, and he just occupies that seat in order to keep everybody calm. Mm-hmm.
wow,
I know. And then a year later, he didn't turn out to be such a placeholder after all. But at the time, that's how they saw him. And of course, I've been thinking about that for the last 4 years with our own country.
yeah,
No, for God's sake.
yeah.
it's funny how alike we are, even while we are so different in other countries.
Yeah.
And there's that sense of community that transcends language and nationality and I don't know your prejudices and your preferences, all of that. That allows you to sit down and just chat with people. And I miss that.
Man, I hear that. And I want to say, like, in the chat here, a lot. First off, a lot of people, like, you've got like a lot of people love the story you just told. But somebody here says I had a similar experience in Japan.
I bet.
Folks who spoke very little to no English would say Obama to me. Just go up and say Obama. I've had a lot of people who travel internationally, which I don't. I mean, I've done a little bit of, but not a lot, where they have said, like, out there, it's like the entire world was like, oh, good job, America. We didn't know you had that in you, you know?
Yes.
And then to go from that, where it's like the whole world was like, really, America? Really? Yeah. But to move over here into a couple of these questions,
Okay.
um, I'm gonna scroll back in our chat a little bit here. Um, um,
You can
oh,
cut out the four-letter words.
no, you're in good company here. Um, now, these are some good questions. And again, you can feel all of these questions. You can be like, I'll pass for any reason,
Oh,
and
that's all right.
well,
I don't get very many questions that I feel like I have to pass on.
well, this one is, it says, Terry, I know that you wrote the novelization for The Phantom Menace. Are you having issues similar to Alan Dean Foster and others with your royalty payments from them? And I thought as a former attorney, you might have some good insight for us. So like this one's kind of big or kind of fraught, or if you're doing something, you can just say pass and we'll move on. Or feel free to chime in if you want.
I don't have any trouble with my royalties from anybody, including the Star Wars people. I was fairly close to Star Wars people, though. I was lucky because I was, writing the first of those books, and I got to pretty much do what I wanted to do. And so I never really wanted to go back. It was kind of a one-off for me, and I got to do it at the beginning, so I didn't have to know anything, which I didn't. And so no, but I think the thing they have to do if they're having problems, it really depends on the nature of the problem. Sometimes you can solve these problems by writing the company and saying, is there a difficulty with getting the royalty statements out? As a matter of fact, everybody's having that problem right now.
Yeah.
So,
But actually it might have, because the news broke just a little while ago. Alan Dean Foster has been having trouble, and I don't know if you caught the news.
no,
He went to SIFWA and
yes,
said, "Hey, Disney, Disney ain't paying
yeah,
because Disney bought Lucasfilm, and Lucasfilm owned the rights to books." And effectively, somebody in the mix is saying, "Oh no, we bought the assets, which are the books. We didn't buy the liabilities, which is the responsibility to pay royalties."
yes.
And and they've been trying to work it out for years. And finally, they got stonewalled enough that SIFWA itself, Mary Robinette,
Right.
they posted an official thing saying, "What the hell, Disney? We've been trying to talk to you, and now we're going public because you're being shitty." And it feels like only a couple of weeks ago the news broke, and Alan Dean Foster,
Yeah.
he's
This is a name.
not nobody, and for them to pull this on him, even after he's tried to and he knows the industry, he knows how to lawyer up. Mary Robinette is amazing, and SIFWA, I mean, we're not, you know
Therefore, doesn't have the clout.
well, we don't have a ton of clout, but we're not nobody either. And especially with Mary at the helm, I would fight a gorilla before I got in that scrap.
This
Um,
is all about tight purse strings,
yeah,
and two companies of that size reach an impasse on who's responsible. What they do is it's ostrich time. And it's not my problem, it's their problem. And then the other person says it, and there's nobody to make them do anything until you get somebody of stature in there, or some leverage somehow to persuade them that it would be a really good idea. Now, history teaches us that when you cheat authors out of money that they have rightfully coming, that tends to come back to bite you on your hindquarters. Because eventually somebody says, what's wrong with this company? This company can't be trusted. And that's a rep they don't want to get. So there's, you just kind of have to hunker down and dig in and go after them.
And
Uh,
it
until
sounds,
somebody finally says, all right already. Because there's got to be language in those agreements that says, you're responsible for this, you're responsible for that. Because, the one thing about lawyers is they don't leave too much unturned with those big companies like that. Those agreements are ironclad, and it's very specific about who's going to take care of what and when. These days, particularly, where that's practically, I think about how things were going to get easier for us, and in the paper department with the computers. And I think about how we were going to because things would be much more simple in the future when it came to drafting agreements. Well, sometimes it has, but mostly we just, due to regulations and other things, everything we sign has 40 pages right off the bat. Have you bought a house lately? Because I have, and it's about drive me insane. It's just out of sight, and I'm a lawyer for kind of thought. I don't want to mess with this junk.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the answer to the question, I think.
Yeah. No. And you're right. I think the key is like eventually, eventually the only way around some of these bad things is if they won't do the right thing, then you gotta kick up a fuss, because the thing that Disney should be valuing above all else is its reputation.
Yes, and indeed they do.
Yeah. Another question or two. I'll say, this one's for me. Do you have a favorite of Terry's books you'd recommend for someone looking for their next read? I have a particular fondness for the Magic Kingdom for Sale books. Like, I remember, I started with Shannara back in the day, very early. That was instrumental for me. But Magic Kingdom for Sale, it was, I dug it so much. I'm actually thinking about it now. I think my oldest is old enough. I think he could get in on that.
How old is he?
He's 11 now.
Oh, he's old enough.
Yeah, he'll dig that. He reads probably at a...
He reads a lot, and I bet he does, yeah.
Yeah, he probably reads at an 18-year-old level, I'm guessing. It's just an issue of, like, sometimes I try to keep... He just doesn't want to read another book with a dead dog in it, is the big thing,
Well, there's a lot of those out there.
Yeah.
I think I've read them all, too.
Um,
Did you know what Magic Kingdom is really about? Did I ever tell you that?
No, like, hit me.
Okay, well, on the surface of things, it's about a lawyer who gets fed up with his job and his life and his bad breaks with his wife and so forth. And he takes a flyer and buys this Magic Kingdom, and later discovers that the Magic Kingdom isn't all he thought it was going to be. And in fact, there's a lot of people who like to kill him, and he's in considerable danger. So that was the surface story. What I wrote that book about, metaphorically, was about changing from being a lawyer to becoming a writer. That's what that book is about.
Oh, that's like really great. Now when I get to reread it as like either with my boys or like, just to like read it alongside them so we can talk about it again, that's going to be really neat to
look at
like see it through that lens. That's so cool.
And I did, and I was at that age, when this happened, when I wrote that book, I was 44. And I was thinking, I'm not altogether, well, no, I was at 42. I'm not happy with my life. My life was not going the right way. The law was not living up to my expectations. I felt I was throwing stuff away. I wanted to make this change, and here's the opportunity. But it's not going to be clear, smooth sailing for me there either. It's going to be a new set of demands. And it's sort of like the midlife crisis that all of us go through at some point, whether it's midlife or some point. And that was part of what I was looking at too. And I thought people might identify with that to some extent. Maybe they did.
I say I loved it so much and I was a teenager when I read it. And
Yeah.
also, I'll say like right now in my life, 40, 47, I'm pretty sure I haven't done the math recently. Um, but like it does my heart good to hear you say, "Oh, I was 42 and I was just starting to, and I'm like, "Oh, like maybe I'm maybe I don't have to think of myself as on the downward slide of my career yet." Like
Not
I
for another 20 years.
okay, good. Thank you for I mean, I'm going to actually take that as permission.
It is permission. And
Uh
life is a long time. A long time.
that feels real good. That feels
You go through so many phases of things. I can say this now, looking back on it, remembering where I was at different points. And there are definite points in your life when your physicality changes, and of course your interests change all the time. Mine do anyway. I'm always moving away from one thing and onto something else because I change and my views change and my interests and the things that impress me and don't impress me, all that changes. And I've just given into it because I think maybe it's better that way. It's more interesting that you can say that, yeah, well, I've changed my mind about that. That was back when I was, in my 20s or whatever. But now I think a little differently than I used to think about it. I didn't used to be political at all. I mean, all the way through probably into my mid 30s, I never paid much attention to any of that stuff. And now I find myself, tooth and nail in there, really with the Heritage series when I was writing about destruction of the environment, always incorporating some aspect of what I see as a problem with the world and questions I have about the political, social,
well, and I got to say that I do in my from what I've seen of people, I see people typically either you grow into it, like you learn more about the world, you grow as a person, and you learn to care more and more, you learn that things are much more complex. And then some people unfortunately seem to grow almost like smaller and smaller. It's like, no, all I care about is this, only my family, only my town, only my house. um and I'll also say that in the books you were always talking about something. But again, one of the things I really respect is that you were never talking just about one thing. Because, like, I can admire somebody who's like, I want people to think about climate change, and they write a book about climate change. I'm like, great.
no,
That.
I don't think that's the thing about fantasy, right? That's the thing about fantasy. You don't actually have to write specifically about this world and our problems. You can write about a problem or a consideration in a totally different environment. You're one step removed. And I think that makes a lot of what we do more palatable than if we were writing a polemic or we were writing an expose or something. I mean, I read those things, but I don't know. Have you read a book called The Overstory?
Sorry, I just got
No, that's all right.
I got a note passed to me, which
Shut him up. Do anything you
no,
can.
no, no. It was something getting delivered here. Oh, this is to show something just got delivered. This is for you to show, not to give away. So they're making sure that they just delivered something. Don't give it away in your live stream where you're just supposed to show it off.
Oh, be very big-hearted of you.
Yeah. Um. So, I'm
Right.
sorry. You had just asked me a
I
question.
just mentioned the Overstory because it's such a great book about ecological destruction and about it, but it's not told as it takes place in this world, but it's told as a piece of fiction about the lives of people who were involved both directly and peripherally in the destruction of the forest.
Huh.
And it's written by Richard Powers, who's a award-winning fiction writer who's done a lot of great work. But it's something of a slog because it's a big book. But damn, is it good! And you come away from that book thinking he's nailed it perfectly for where we stand on the whole issue of the destruction of the forest, about what counts and what doesn't, about what people do to help or to hinder. Anyway, I look for those kinds of stories a lot.
Yeah, and I that's the same thing that I love about all the speculative fiction that's done in a certain way is, all the best stuff, like Terry Pratchett, like, I some of it was like just good fun, but as he again grew in his craft, the book that I read, I'm like, I love this book for this reason. Then I come back 15 years later and I'm like, oh, this is something entirely else. This is
Yeah,
just, this is something
yeah.
like, how could I have ever, uh, like, how could I have missed?
I looked at it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, um, there was, um, a couple. I mean, there's just a lot of love and kindness here in the chat, and a lot of like, hell yes. So to a lot of the things you're saying.
You know what my wife Jadine says about my readers?
What was that?
She says, and she means that, she says, you have the best reader fans in the world because they are invariably kind. They are invariably considerate of each other. They form their own communities. We never have troubles when we go on the road, ever. I probably jinxed it now, but nevertheless, we don't. And I think what a compliment. I mean, I can't think of anything better than saying your readers are wonderful people.
Yeah.
And then I can add, yes, and so discerning.
Yes. Well, obviously they have excellent taste, and everything else just naturally follows from that.
Yes, it just does. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt. Go on.
No, no. It was, I think, one of the questions, although I've lost the particular wording of it, because I'm bad at keeping up with the scroll, is to say, it was to both of us. Is there a a book or series that you read, and you're like, and you loved it, and you've never understood why everyone didn't already know about it and talk about it and love it? Because like, like, so not maybe even your favorite, but like a really good one that you're like, why does nobody read this and talk? Like, why isn't this book famous? Why isn't this person famous? Do you have a book or a series like that?
You know what? I mostly have the opposite reaction.
Oh,
What in the
yeah.
world does anybody see in this book? I mean, and they went, the ones that win awards and get glowing reviews, and I read the book and I'm left cold. I'm thinking, I don't. Not only do I not understand this book, I don't like this book. I don't like the way it's written. I don't think the style is particularly good. But yeah, I tend to. There's a writer named Nicholas Christopher who wrote a book called Trip to the Stars that I thought was terrific, and he got marginal interest, and he wrote a book called Veronica that I don't know why everybody doesn't read that book, because it's like non-stop movement from beginning to end. I think that's a terrific book. Right now, do you know a writer named T.J. Klune?
That almost tickles my memory, but I don't think so.
Into YA. He writes YA fantasy science fiction. What's the way? I say fantasy rather than science fiction.
Yeah.
And he wrote a book called The House on the Cerulean Sea. I just gave a massive review for that I just loved, because it was one of the few books I've read where not a whole lot happens, but you feel a lot. It makes you feel a lot, understand. And at the end of that book, I thought, oh my God, I want to cry for this story. And that was good. And Alex Harrow, who's new, who is in Kentucky, but I don't hold that against her. I just did a Zoom. I did a Zoom with her a little while ago where we talked shop, and I admire her book. She wrote The 10,000 Doors of January, and she just had a new book come out called The Once and Future Witches. Both terrific books, and I like her a lot. And she's my kind of girl. And there's just so many choices out there where they're doing something, and I don't know how many of these writers will find a major audience, or if they'll be mid-list sellers or whatever. but what they all share in common to me is they have that gift for storytelling. They know how to tell a story. They know how to make you feel something. And that's what I'm always looking for. If they make me feel something by the end of that book, good job. I'm on my way to the next one. If they don't make me feel something and it's simply stylistic for stylistic's sake, or if it just kind of lays there and begs to be shot, then I tend to move on pretty fast.
Yeah.
But mostly there's such good writing out there. And a lot of, have you read M.R. Tolles?
Mm-mm.
Oh my God. Well, I read a lot outside my field because that's one of the things that has taught me so much. Don't just read one thing in one genre. You read outside your field. And M.R. Tolles wrote a book called A Gentleman in Moscow, which is, it's hard to tell you what it's about, but if you read it, you'll understand why I'm recommending it. And then he wrote Rules of Civility, which is also a terrific story. Both of them about the past. Shaping the characters and speaking to you now, that sort of thing. He's writing about people in certain situations. The Gentleman in Moscow is all about a Russian aristocrat who is imprisoned in a hotel for the whole book. You think, oh, and I read this. When I first read this, I thought, like I'm going to read that.
Right.
And my wife, Judine, says, read this book, which I know is a request, but it sounds like an order. And she was right. It was an amazing book. I read what she does. I read what Karen Russell writes. I think Karen is a terrific storyteller, but not in the traditional sense of fantasy storytelling, although there's fantasy elements all through her work. There are just so many and I'm always reading something new and wonderful. You just have to be willing to. I follow the trades pretty closely. And if I see something recommended that sounds like I might like it, or something that gets a lot of press, then I'll read it. I'll even read things that I would never read, just because if it's getting a lot of press, there's something there. So I want to know, what is it?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll read 50 pages and say, well, whatever it is, I don't care. But at least I am looking to see what it is this writer can do that might really teach me something about how to be a different kind of writer, or to be a more expanded writer in my style and in my choice of topics.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You just can't ever be sure. There's an awful lot of writers I haven't read that I should read too.
Boy, I hear that. But I now have like a little list of, to add to my pile of stuff I want to read. Although I gotta say, the 10,000 Doors of January is a title so good that I'm angry I didn't use it for something myself. Like,
it was her first book. I think it was a breakout book. I should say. I think it was her first book. It was a breakout book. But in any case, it is. I will tell you right now, you should read it because it is different. It's not something you've seen before.
Yeah.
And what she does is quite good. I mean, geez, there's so many I could name.
I gotta say, if you're not opposed to reading a YA book, it's one that I just stumbled onto because I really like to. It's not that I want to be a gatekeeper and keep my older boy away from books. It's that, I mean, sometimes,
Sometimes you want to be careful.
I want to be careful. I mean, I'm careful about the food he eats and what he puts in his body. I want to be a little careful about what he puts in his brain, because, I mean, if on the simplest level, like, he does not want to read another book where the dog dies and he's so sad. But also, like, that's better than him reading something that kind of quietly teaches him how to be sexist. I don't want that either.
Yeah.
And so, but I picked up under recommendation from a friend that owns a bookstore out of Madison, Room of One's Own. She said, Sal and Gabby break the universe, and Sal and Gabby fix the universe. Have you checked those out?
I just read some stuff about that in the recent PWs that
I
And they really got some. They really sound interesting.
what I love, and I won't. I mean, I would like talk about them endlessly, but partly to avoid spoilers, but also just to say, like, a lot of times you read a book, um, and sometimes it happens in fantasy, where I think it's a reaction to the fear of uh, writing a Mary Sue, where it's like, which is never a fear I had, like, reading the Odyssey, it's like I like the fact that he's good at everything. Thank you. This is exciting.
Yeah.
Odysseus is not a Mary Sue, and neither is Cyrano de Bergerac. Um, but but especially in YA fiction, I think a lot of times they show somebody like through hard knocks learning the life lessons and coming to the understanding that you know of X, and like that there's a place for that, and those can be good. But I started reading this, and like in the first couple of chapters, uh um this kid ends up, like, in the second chapter, this kid ends up in the principal's office, and the principal is like, so you've been in this school for 3 days, and this is the third time you
Figure,
you're in my office. What do you think? What do you think this means? And then he internally he kind of recounts for the reader like what got him there, and it was that this thing happened with one of his teachers, and in gym class, because he's diabetic, he had just done something, and then he'd eaten some Skittles to bring his blood sugar up. And then in the third one, there'd been a bullying incident where somebody had taken away like his little his kit where he has like his stuff that he needs to test his blood.
yeah.
And so what happens is this kid says to her, you know, well, Mrs. Martinez, I think it means that teachers and students in this school really have a long way to go in terms of learning how to deal with someone with an invisible disease like diabetes. And I read it, I'm like, what, my little man? Like, you're coming out like that? And this is what was amazing, it would be so easy to make that teacher or that principal be lousy. And
Yeah.
then this child's story is the story of triumphing over the adversity of like people being dumb and whatever. And instead, the principal goes, I think you're right. We do need to work on that. And I really would like to talk with you later about how we could be better about this.
Right.
And then she's like, now, still, you are in my office. There's been an incident. We're going to deal with that too. But what had occurred to me is that this person has written a fantasy novel.
Mhm.
And the fantasy that they created is the school this child goes to is sort of a school for the arts. It's in Florida. There's a diverse group of teachers and students. But all of the teachers care, and they're not all perfect. They try, they're smart, they are, and there's no mustache twirling villain who's just bad. They've created a fantasy world of a school full of adults who care and want to be good, and who sometimes dunk it and sometimes need to be informed, or sometimes try and then do it wrong. In the same way that, like, I made a fantasy world and I'm like, wouldn't it be cool if there was magic? Like, wouldn't it be cool if also these things, wouldn't this be cool?
Yeah.
And it's like, but I'm like imagining being a kid, and it's like, wouldn't it be cool if like there was a school and there were teachers who actually listened to me? And this
It does
kid,
sound like a fantasy,
well, I mean, it's
but it's
it's
what we would love to see.
yeah. Well, and there are actually like straight up fantastic elements in it too, which is like I always like a little bit of sauce on my book,
Yeah.
where he can reach through and see through dimensions, and I'm like, cool, like give me
That's,
that.
now we're talking.
Yep.
Now you're
And so,
real.
but it also in this world, like there's there's artificial intelligence, and also. So it's like there's strange and wonderful, but like, and also he's like he speaks. He's first generation. One of his parents is Cuban,
Yeah.
and so like people are speaking Spanish in this book, and I'm like, huh, I don't know what that means. And I'm like, but I like seeing it in a book. I go, my bet my kid can understand this better than me because he knows a little Spanish.
I have to stop you here to tell you why this reminds me of the house on the Cerulean Sea.
Yeah.
Why you need to read this, because it's very similar, except that it's not a school, it's an orphanage. And
Oh.
the orphanage is visited by a functionary from, the government, come to assess the situation there. And he's very accomplished in the fact that he knows how to do these assessments and he's seen everything. This orphanage is populated by 6 students and none of them is human.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Is that a cool concept?
I want that. I want to read that.
And wait, you read it, and they are so different, and they are different, but but the thing is, and everybody is afraid of a couple of them. One of them is the child of the Antichrist.
Wow.
Yes. And these kids, though, at heart, are still kids. They don't act any differently than real kids. They just look different. I mean, the concept is it's such a high concept and so pertinent to the way we feel about things and the world at large. And the way he handles the story, I won't tell you anything more, but I will tell you the way he handles the story is something to see. He is very, very good.
I did not expect to walk away from this with books I'm super excited about, but but that's a treat.
I'm always thinking about these kinds of books, of the few that we've seen. And I remember this about that damn book you wrote. My reaction was the first one now, not the second one, the first one. Shadow on the Wind?
Name of the Wind.
Name of the Wind. I always get you confused with what's his name that wrote The Shadow on the Wind. Anyway, Name of the Wind. When I was done with that book, my first reaction was the reaction I have to so many books that I really love. I wish I'd written this book.
Oh,
that is the reaction you should have. When you read something you really love, it's not that you could have written it and you didn't.
Yeah.
It's only that you wish your name were on this book because you loved it so much. And we all have those books that we always remember, that we always thought were so wonderful in our lives and that means something to us, even when you get up to my age, and it's not going to go away.
Yeah, that's for me. The one that always happens whenever I read it, I feel it again. And you're right. Yeah. It's not I could have, because I know I couldn't have. But for me, it's The Last Unicorn.
Oh, I love that book. That book has informed me forever.
Yep.
But you know what? And the other book he wrote that I absolutely love is A Fine and Private.
I knew it. I as soon as you said, "Oh, the other book," I'm like, "Of course he loves The Fine and Private Place."
Oh, yeah.
How the hell did Peter write? That was his first book.
I don't want to think about that too closely.
Yeah, I don't want to think about that either. But no, I am not surprised that. But again, I came to grips with that early in my career too, where I'm like, I wish I'd written The Last Unicorn, but I can never do that. It's like
you cannot do it, right?
Yeah. And I'm like, the best I could do is write a really lousy ripoff of The Last Unicorn. I better find the book that I can write and try to write that one as best as I can.
Yeah, I think we'll have to settle for doing what we can do the best, rather than what somebody else has done that we would love to have done.
Yeah.
You don't want to get into a situation. I mean, Sword of Shannara is a riff on Tolkien. There's no question about it. But it transformed after Elfstones into something more, and that probably saved this series for as long as it has, and it's gone its own way. But you just desperately search all your life for those books that make you feel like you had a really special experience, and they're not all that hard to find. You just have to put a little effort into it, and you have to trust your instincts of what sounds right. But like those books you were talking about,
yeah,
those sounded like
Yeah.
books that I would enjoy.
Yeah.
So now that on your recommendation, I gotta go get them.
Yeah. So, and I immediately went on Twitter and hassled the poor author. I came out of nowhere and I'm like, hey, you don't know me from a hole in the ground, but
Yeah.
like I love your books and I'm so excited for your like this isn't on behalf of my kid. I'm not cool. It's like I read your books. They're amazing. Now I'm gonna give them to my boys.
I don't think we should be ashamed to say that we loved a book at any age preference.
You're
You know,
correct.
books
Yeah.
are marketed to certain people. But my wife was a former bookseller and district manager at Walden's, and her specialty was children's books. And she has the most wonderful children's books. Some of them are the books that are all pictures and no language.
Yeah.
Those are sometimes the best. And why should you not love those? And why should I not read YA and love what is being done? Much of it is as adult as anything being written by adults.
Yep.
And I know in my heart that if I were publishing Sword of Shannara today, they would very well publish it as a YA book.
Oh, yeah. Oh, of course they would.
Back then, because the YA market was, a cesspool of forgotten books that nobody read.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not very many, and kids certainly never read. I never read a YA book back then. That was, you were a kid if you read a YA book. That's all changed around, and now YA is very much as acceptable to adults. Maybe thanks to J.K. Rowling, I don't know, but there's no reason why we can't indulge in a little reading in an area that is not necessarily marketed to us, but that we simply love.
Yeah. Yep.
And I talk to those writers, and you know what? If you talk to those authors, my gosh, they've got just as many smarts as you do, just as much talent as you do, and they have the same interests, and they're real people writing real books.
Yeah.
And to cut that off from your expectations. I mean, Laini Taylor.
Oh, she's amazing.
Maggie Stiefvater. Geez, no, I love those.
Yeah.
I do. I love them.
Yeah.
And I've met most of them, not all of them yet. I still have Maggie Stiefvater on my to-do list. But Marie Lu. I mean, I love what they're doing, and with fantasy and science fiction and hybrids thereof. So I'm gonna take a chance and keep on reading them.
And that's good. And it is interesting where it wasn't until I said that where I realized I was still hanging on to a little bit of that, like, oh, I should be doing serious reading, not kid books. Mm-hmm. But like kid books are harder to write. Like you need to hold yourself to a higher standard, in my opinion, if you're writing for young folk. Like, just because, like playgrounds have higher safety standards than whatever an adult playground would be, a mall. I don't know. My analogy fell through there.
I don't think you should ever limit yourself by saying you should be reading stuff in your field, or you should be reading stuff that is going to appeal to you and as an adult, because we're not really adults. We aren't. We're adults aging, but inside there's a child, and we wouldn't be doing what we do if there wasn't a child inside of us that needs to be fed. And we feed it through our reading.
Terry, I was so excited to have you on here, and I was so excited to be able to let some of the people who would swing by on this stream get to hear you talk. But I did not expect this to be so good for my heart. Like,
oh, good.
Glad to hear that. And it's honestly, and I should not be surprised, because every time we've met and we've gotten to hang out, I have left feeling like better about the world and better about myself, and I feel more relaxed. Like, you are just straight up one of my favorite people. Oh no. And also somebody just sent me a message saying, hey, I love that you're talking with Terry, but you've kept him longer than you promised to. And so
that's all right. I have nothing better to do with my life.
Well, now that you've said that, I'm going to be pestering you like nobody's business. but again, thank you so much for coming on here and being willing to help us promote this. Um, and just I like you so much.
Well, I'll tell you what, Patrick. I've been using your quote without fail for the Shannara series, and shamelessly, I might add. Uh, but I just wrote something that's coming out next June that I wrote in 4 months in one of those white hot heats that you get in sometimes. And it's the kind of thing that I didn't have to write it, but I was bored and I wanted something to do. So I wrote it from April through, I guess it would be August or so. I wrote that thing and sent it in. I showed it to Judine and I said, "What do you think?" And she said, "Best thing you've written in years." So then I
Oh,
sent it in to my agent and she says, "This is who you really are. Where has this been?" And
oh.
I know. And I said to Ann Groh, my editor, and she said, "I absolutely love this book. This is your next book. This is the book that will follow up all your Shannara books because I think it can hold its own." So I'm going to send you that. I'm going to see if you like it well enough. I'm going to shamelessly beg for a quote.
You know, like
I,
again, I can't like everyone here on the stream. It's like, yeah, of course I gave Terry Brooks a blur. Like he's amazing, but and then he's like, "Oh, I've been using your quote." I'm like, "But why do you need to? Or why would you want to?"
you know,
But and I will say, just everybody, um, like, and I guess since we're doing this talk, I'll say this will be the last thing. I promise. Hey, people, like my team watching the
making
stream,
noises like,
I'll say this and then I'll let them go. I promise. But you know, for us, like for me, like we had the book, and we're spooling it up, and Betsy was excited,
yeah,
and it's like, okay, how do we launch this kid? And and when it came back from you that you were willing to blurb it, and we're like, oh, okay. So it's like now we got a blurb from Terry Brooks, and now not only do we want to use this forever, but we're gonna like use that as a lever to get other people to read it,
yeah.
because and it was such a big deal. Like, and I was so I knew how lucky I was, and I still feel so lucky that lucky to the nth degree, because I've had a chance to meet you, and you're one of those rare people who is every bit as wonderful as I hope one of my favorite authors would be.
I
Um,
hope I hope that you'll tell Betsy when you speak to her that she still hasn't sent me the 500.
oh, the
That never plays into it ever.
I will also say the theme of this year's fundraiser is something to look forward to, and now I have something I have to look forward to that I get to read soon.
I hope so. I hope you'll love it.
Oh, thank you so much, and I hope to talk to you. Yeah, I'll talk to you before too long.
All right. Bye, Patrick.
Bye.